Show, where we help top leaders find their pathway to incredible success and a lifetime of happiness. Here is your host, Tom Dutta, the Quiet Warrior.
All right, everybody. Welcome to the Quiet Warrior Show. My name's Tom Dutta. It's awesome to have you here. And hey, we're live streaming today. That means we're on LinkedIn, Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. So give us a subscribe if you're on the YouTube feed. Click the button there. That allows you to get the live production when it comes out. We'll be producing this into an international podcast and a video YouTube premiere in the near future. So can't wait to get that out to you. Hey, listen, the guest I have today it blows my mind, the story you're going to hear. She is in the green room. I just want to tell you a couple quick things and then bring her on. It's a pleasure actually to welcome Maria MALIK from born in Toronto, Canada, a fellow Canadian who currently resides in Southern California. There's a lot of cool things to her story, but I want to tell you that when I bring people on the show, they catch my interest when they have a story to tell, a story that may be courageous and something we learn from. So I said to Maria, because I read somewhere on LinkedIn that she says my story is a zero to hero story. And I went, well, that's got to have something worth talking about. I sent her an email. I said, tell me about your gut punches. Tell me about what you overcame to get where you are. And I'm going to just read you a small paragraph of what she sent me to get you really excited to hear her. She says, at age 17, I was at my lowest. I was taken away from my home in Toronto, Canada, sent to Pakistan to marry a man I had never met before. Against all odds, against all family pressures, against all pressure from Pakistani society, I got divorced after a few years. And I can tell you that the story is going to go from here and it's going to go up because what she's going to share with you is just remarkable. Imagine, before I click the button here, everybody, that you're 17 years old and that's your circumstance. So welcome to the show, Maria.
Hi, Tom. Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely wonderful. California, sunny California. Is the sun shining today?
It's beautiful outside. It's warm. It's nice. I love it here.
Yeah, well, being a Canadian, so you were originally from Toronto, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes, grew up in Toronto. I love Toronto. It's always home. It will always be home for me, but it's very cold there. It's very cold.
Yeah, for those, we have an international audience, but for those who know, I'm in Vancouver, British Columbia, this side of the country. Marie, we actually get the warm currents up here from California. So I love it that you're pushing that our way. It's fairly mild here today. But in Toronto, you're right. I mean, I've traveled there a lot in my past for business too. You have the Great Lakes, which kind of landlocks of this beautiful city, and it does get cold. So, you know what? You and I connected. I told the audience a little bit about you. Let's go back into the story. Take us back. Well, go far as back as you want. I'd love to know about your childhood and just growing up, and then get us to age 17 in the story and what happened.
Sure. So I, like many people, I'm from an immigrant family. My parents moved to Canada to provide for a better life for me. My mom, my dad first moved. So he worked really hard. He came to the country with absolutely nothing. And the hopes was to basically give the family a good life. So my dad worked really hard. You know, we first lived in a 1-bedroom apartment for a few years. Then finally, when I had more siblings, we moved into a 2-bedroom. And my dad really also has, I think, a zero to hero story where he built everything from scratch. Eventually,
what did he do? And when he was back home before he came here?
Yeah. So when he was back home, so my dad was an artist and he was doing very odd jobs here and there. He was painting, he was a photographer for weddings. And in Pakistan, you don't really make that great of a living when you're a photographer or you're a painter. So he knew that now I have a family, so I need to, provide for the family. And when he came to Canada, he started with a very minor job. He was working at a factory, worked really hard. Sometimes I remember my mom telling me he would finish a 12-hour shift and then start another 12-hour shift.
Oh my goodness.
Work like that. Yeah. So I did see a lot of, hard work while growing up. And I think that it reflected a lot on me and made me the person that I am too. But we came to the country. My dad worked really hard, gave us a very good life. But I think the problem was that now as I was growing up, I wanted to be part of Canadian society. I wanted to wear what I wanted to wear. I wanted to go out with friends. As I was growing up, my parents were so used to the life in Pakistan where girls just stayed home. They were very homely and they like to cook and clean and just be with the family. Whereas I was very different. I was very sporty. I joined every sports team and I just wanted to be out all the time and loved the outdoors. So as I was growing up, I think my parents were just getting a little bit scared that she doesn't know anything about our culture and she's completely moving the other way. And girls don't do that in Pakistan. Girls don't do this. Yeah. So my parents, I guess their remedy for this was to put me in an Islamic school when I was just finishing grade 6.
And that was in Toronto as well.
Yes, so that was in Toronto. And this is where all my friends were now moving on to middle school and, they were then going to go to high school. So my parents put me in an all-girls Islamic school and I hated it. Hated every second of it. Because now I had to wear the hijab, I had to wear an abaya, and I have lots of respect for people that do and people that want to do it because it's their choice, but I didn't want to wear it. And for me, it was just very different going from public school where I could play sports, do all these things, to now a very conservative Islamic school where there was a lot more emphasis on Islamic studies. There was a lot more emphasis on culture, and you couldn't go out because it was a girls' school. They wouldn't even let you out. There was no recess. Recess was just, okay, wow. You have 15 minutes, just sit on your desk. There was no sports, nothing. And me being very sporty while growing up, like I was craving that. So eventually I started to revolt against them a little bit. I was like, I don't want to be here. I don't want to do this. And I started failing my classes because I just wasn't happy. I was always just a B average student. I wasn't I wasn't that smart to begin with, but I maintained good grades before that. And now I just kind of gave up. So I was failing my classes. I was always in trouble. I got suspended once for going to the coffee shop right next to us, which was like a 10 minute, like not even 10 minutes. It was like 10 steps away. So I think that for me was the last straw when I got suspended for going to a coffee shop.
And what age were you now at this point?
This was probably like 15, 16, probably wow. 16.
Yeah, so congratulations for getting suspended in a coffee shop. I never had that experience. And you know what? You have a life experience that I'm going like, oh my goodness. I'm going to get you to catch your breath for a minute. I want to just chime in there. First of all, I love your story. I'm honored to hear it. And, I know that you're doing a lot of speaking and it's a lot of courage to come out and speak about this story. So I want to honor you for doing that, Maria, because for every one of you that does it, I know there's 10 others that want to speak. I have a connection to you in that my parents were born in Fiji, but my grandparents are from India, and so I'm an immigrant to a country where, I've written about this. Where fitting in is, I had a saying. I say that stepping up and fitting in is not selling out. But unfortunately, I've met a lot of South Asian people from other countries that the young people have this hidden secret where they're struggling with it, and they love their parents, and they just feel like they're in this box. And so let's going back into the story. A couple things I wanted to ask you about that was sports. I just want to give it back to you. Tell me about the kind of sports you played and where does that come from? A passion in your heart or an experience? And then tell us about your mom. You haven't talked about her much, and so give it back to you for that.
Yeah, absolutely. So the sports came with me starting to play volleyball, and I was always good at sports. I loved gym. Like I was one of the students that actually looked forward to gym. And I got into track and field. I started playing volleyball. I loved volleyball. I even joined the baseball team. I even tried out for basketball, even though I was terrible at it. I was still like, no, I'm going to try it and see how it is. Did not make the team for basketball, but I was really good at volleyball. I was on the track and field team. And I was also on the baseball team, and I was really good at it. So, which is why I just wanted to keep going, and it was fun for me. I wasn't a very studious student to begin with, even though I was, like I said, B average, but sports were fun. That's why I wanted to do it. And I'm an active person, so that's why I love doing them. And my mom, she was like any other, typical Pakistani mom, stay-at-home mom, taking care of the kids, and me being the eldest, I had to kind of take on a mom role too, because I had 3 younger siblings. Yeah. So I was the one picking them up from school and dropping them off. And a lot of these extracurricular activities were after school. So my mom would be like, no, you need to pick up your siblings, bring them home. And I was like, no, but I have track and field. I have this, I have that. So there was a lot of tension there. And my mom, she kind of expected me to come home and like help with the cooking, the cleaning as I was getting older. And I tried to do it as much as I could, but because of that conflict where everything was after school and then I was expected to come home and help with everything, me and my mom used to just clash a lot. she expected me to be a certain way. And I was
Yeah.
kind of going the exact opposite. I was a tomboy and, I wasn't very feminine at the time. And my mom was like, girls don't dress like that. And girls aren't supposed to speak like that and everything. So that's kind of about my mom. She was just great cook, always at home, taking care of the family. And I was expected to be just like her.
Yeah. So thank you for sharing that. Again, we honor you. I mean, that part's hard to always talk about. We talk about our moms and our dads. My dad passed away in January 2018 unexpectedly
Sorry to
from a
hear.
heart attack. But as I've asked you to check my story a bit, I mean, I hadn't seen my dad since I was 12 because he left home, and he's a pretty bad alcoholic, and there was all sorts of things that destroyed the family. What I'm remarking at is that your story is so familiar to other stories I've heard. In fact, if I just go into my own family, in my own life, it's as my wife tells her story growing up as an Italian. I married an Italian outside of my culture too, and
Mhm.
she talks the way you do. She played volleyball. She went to the provincial finals 5 years straight, but the rules in the house were you're not allowed to date boys, you're not allowed to play sports, and so
Mhm.
she grew up, with loving parents. She felt, but under different rules, and lost her identity. And the one thing I just want to say, because my mind's riffing on this, is that I watch a lot of Russell Peters. If you know Russell Peters, of course, right? The
Yes.
comedian. His stuff's hilarious, and I'm not saying this for any reason other than to poke fun at ourselves because we can, right? Is that Russell says that if your parents said to you, which we heard you say, and everybody, it's a teaching moment, come to this country for a better life. Well, it's like, if you brought me here for a better life, then let me choose the life I deserve and desire. I really believe there's a way to live that life, and I know we're going to give it to you to get into the story how this went from that point. But I believe there's a way to live the life and still respect their parents. And this is a bold statement, but a woman I met who's a psychologist, she's this Asian lady, and she says, I was the worst parent. I controlled my kids and all this. And she says, let me tell you, and let me tell your audience, mothers have one job and one job only. That's to pop you out. And after
Yeah.
that is to raise you and care for you and then let you go, because that's what we need. But unfortunately, when you come from Pakistan or places where those rules don't exist, it's difficult. So going back into your story, here you are around 16, 17. Hopefully
Mhm.
somebody posted bail to get you out of the coffee shop.
Yeah, that
And
was a bit shocking to me. I knew the school was strict, but I went to the coffee shop, got suspended, and I didn't even tell my parents. So
that's
they gave
crazy.
me a letter, and the next day my dad dropped me to school, and I just went into the building. And instead of going to class, I knew I was suspended. I went to the mall for the first time. And this is me at age like 16. And I was with my hijab, my abaya, I had my uniform on. I was like a kid at a candy shop in a
Yeah.
mall, first time. And I was like, oh my God, this is the real world, like that's what I felt like. So I did that for 2 days because I was suspended for 2 days and didn't tell my parents. At the end of the day, after being at the mall the whole day, I just came back. My dad picked me up and my siblings went home. And I was like, okay, I got away with this. They don't know. But obviously, the school sent a letter home. My parents found
Yeah.
out, like, where were you these 2 days? You were suspended. You weren't allowed in class. And I was like, oh, I was at the mall. And I think that was when they were like, oh my gosh, what are we going to do with her? Like, I was becoming a bit of a troublemaker. I'm not going to lie. I was becoming very rebellious because I'm like, what's with all these rules? I can't even go to a coffee shop. I don't have recess. I can't play, any volleyball anymore. I can't do anything. It's just sit there and study. So my parents eventually, they were like, when principal called us in one more time for something, I don't even know what, like I was being called in every other day or something. And my dad at one point got so frustrated. He's like, what do you want? Like, what is it that you want? And I was like, I really just want to go back to a regular public school. So by this time we had moved closer to the Islamic school too.
Yeah.
So we were now living in Scarborough, and my dad just fed up. He's like, okay, fine. He's like, but you have to bring up your grades and you have to continue wearing the hijab. And I was like, done. Okay, I will do it. Anything. So I went back to an Islam public school, and this was grade 11. So this was just, oh my gosh, I felt like I was a bird that got let out of a cage
Yeah.
or something, because now there were girls wearing makeup, they were wearing jeans, and I was so happy to, get back into that. And I knew, I was like, okay, I have to bring up my grades. But I think because I was in the Islamic school for 4 years, those 4 years, I'd fallen behind so bad. and they put a lot more emphasis on Islamic studies. So I started failing everything. I was failing math, I was failing science, I was struggling, or I was getting like 50s and whatnot. And at this point, I wanted to kind of live life, and I was hanging out with my friends at lunch. I was telling my mom I'm studying, or I'm just going to go do this, and, you know, go to like my friend's house. We'd watch movies. By the way, I wasn't allowed to watch movies. We didn't have cable. I wasn't allowed to watch movies. So very, very strict parenting. So I started hanging out with my friends, and obviously my parents caught on that she's skipping school, she's skipping classes, and they freaked out even more. And eventually, I think the last straw for me was taking off the hijab. I was like, I don't want to wear the hijab.
Yeah.
So I would take off the hijab when I get to school, like a lot of other girls, surprisingly. So parents would drop me off. I'd have my hijab on as soon as I got and take it off. And I hated doing that. Now that I think about it, I'm like, oh, that's such a terrible thing to do. But I was trying to please my parents and kind of live my life too. So there was that dilemma in the clash of two cultures.
I just want to jump in there. So first of all, again, honoring that you shared that. It's hard to share that, but the thing is, I'm experiencing this and just hearing you that. And my show is about what I call the hero's journey. It's based on Joseph Campbell's narrative that we get to points in our life where we have so much pain in our life or some things that we're struggling with. Most people hear that call to adventure, it's called, and they answer it, and then they do something with it. Like you rebelling, going on a journey to discover yourself. But sadly, many people out there live in that pain still, and they ignore that call to adventure to really do something different. So there's something innate in you, which is admirable about courage and resilience. I think those are character traits that people have as they're born. That's just something you find and you use it or you don't. The part that keeps coming to my mind is identity. I find it very terrible to find that somebody's identity is taken away, and a lot of the next gens, and I felt this a little bit growing up. A lot of the next gens feel that they're in this life to please their parents, and I'm going like, no, you're not in it to please your parents. In fact, I said to my own daughter, who's 24 in New Brunswick University, later as she left home, I said, no matter what grades you get in school, no matter who you marry, Dad loves you. I said, those things are not defining what I think of you. And I want to just say this to you, that part of my life is I grew up not loving myself because of the way I was treated. But, love comes from inside, and that's something that you bring with your story. And then we'll get into what you're doing with it. I believe when somebody hears you, Maria, talk, other women out there, they're going like, that's my story. And you're giving them hope and courage, right, to push through it. So way to go. I mean, it's a hard one taking the hijab off, but you know what? It's not really who you are. So somewhere around 17, you got to that lowest point. Tell us about that.
Yeah. So at 17, here I was, what I thought was living my life finally the way I wanted to. It's finally at playing volleyball again and dressing the way that I wanted to and hanging out with friends and everything. And this really scared my parents even more. They said, okay, this is crazy. And someone actually called my house and told my parents, oh, did you know that Maria doesn't wear a hijab anymore? And they freaked out, right? That was kind of like, oh my gosh, what's going to happen? And having 3 younger siblings, they thought that I was going to be a bad example for them. So my parents decided that, okay, we're going to move back to Pakistan so the kids can learn about Pakistani culture. They can learn about the religion more and all of that stuff. And I really didn't want to go. I was like, no, but obviously I had no choice. It wasn't, hey, do you want to go back? It was, we're moving back. It was like that. I think they told us in May and the school year was ending in June. So as soon as I graduated.
That had to be, sorry, I just getting excited. That had to be kind of for that age group here, a little traumatic.
Yeah. Because here I was finally living the life that I wanted, although I wasn't doing good at school, but I was finally doing other things that I wanted. And my parents were like, nope, we're moving back. So we literally, as soon as I graduated in June, started packing, had no choice whatsoever, had to go back. And that summer we just packed. And I think in August, so just 2 months later, we sold everything and moved to Pakistan. And that was a huge culture shock. I think it was my second time in Pakistan. When I went before, I was so much younger, so I didn't even remember much of it. Huge culture shock.
Can you just take us into that picture? Because many people listening would, what's it like there? What draw a picture of that?
Yeah, so it
just
was
anything at all.
It was almost like a controlled chaos. So as soon as we got in the car, we were driving home. There were cars next to us with the back seat, like the trunks open, with kids sitting there, and I was like, oh my god, that's so unsafe, right? But they were just laughing and having fun. There were motorcycles everywhere, bikes everywhere. It was so loud. It was like chaos, but somehow it was working, right? And when we landed, it was nighttime, so I couldn't even see what was going on. And I think in Pakistan it's a little bit more dusty too, so there's a lot of fog. You can't see as clear.
Yeah.
Right away, when your eyes have to like kind of adjust to a new like visuals. It was so weird. But obviously it was with my family, and I thought, okay, everything's gonna be okay. We had like a huge welcoming at the airport, so that was kind of nice, knowing that,
Yeah.
oh, I have cousins, I have family, and because we didn't have any family in Canada, so it seemed nice at first. I was like, okay.
Did you, sorry to interrupt, but did you understand the partition, the history of that, and India and whatnot?
No, I had no idea about
Yeah.
that at that
It's
point.
crazy. I've seen shows on it where people, and I have a friend who actually runs some companies here and goes back there. He's Punjabi, but in Pakistan, the partition, that there's actually houses where the partition goes through them, and the gates are only open so much time of the day. So the farmers have to get back across through the
Wow.
gates. Otherwise, can't get back into their home. I mean, it's
Yeah.
surreal. But anyway, keep going. I'm loving the story.
Yeah. So I think the biggest difference for me was like, I'm an introvert, so I wasn't very talkative, and I get so drained.
You're an introvert?
Yeah. With
Look
all
at you now.
I know, right? It's such a different place that I'm in
But
now.
it's hard work though. It's not like, it's not an act, but it's work. I understand that because people think I'm extroverted, but I actually have that personality.
Yeah, you get drained very easily from
Yeah.
energy, from people talking to you and you standing up and speaking. You get drained very quickly. So here I was now, so many people. I just remember so many people. And we stayed at my aunt's house, and there were like 20 people there at that time. So it was just a lot for me. But obviously it was new, and I was like, okay, it's not like I had a choice, and I was trying to make the best of it. So my parents enrolled me in a government school because I was like, I need to graduate. I haven't even finished grade 12. So they enrolled me in a government speaking school, a government Urdu speaking school. I spoke a little bit of Urdu, could not write it, could not read it. And I was told that all my exams were going to be in English. So they're like, yeah, don't worry, we'll give you your exams in English. I'm like, okay. My parents paid them the fees and everything. So here we are now, starting a new life. My parents got like a small house for us. And I was kind of told that, oh, living in Pakistan means you're going to have, people helping you we're going to have like maids come and do the cleaning. You don't have to do this anymore. You don't even have to go to school if you don't want to, right? You just look pretty. You go shopping all day. They sold me on this lifestyle that does happen a lot there. Like women there are expected more to just wake up, look pretty, and take care of themselves. There wasn't that emphasis on you need to get an education and you have to have a career. There was none of that. Very different lifestyle for women. So I was now put into that lifestyle, but I was like, no, I still want to finish school. I haven't even graduated, high school. And that for me was like, oh my God.
And how did your siblings adjust to that?
So my siblings, they were put into a private school because my parents were like, no, we want to, for some reason, I was put into a government school. My siblings were put into a different private American school, and they didn't like it either. My siblings were all very sick all the time. I surprisingly did okay, but they couldn't adjust to the water there. They were all losing so much weight. When we all came from it, I think we were all healthy and, but my siblings, they were just losing weight so rapidly. And during this time, I guess what ended up happening was when you come from a different country, you kind of attract attention there. So we would have people come to the house, random people show up, hey, we know you have a daughter who's of age. And mind you, I was just 17. Like, we have a son or have a nephew. We want to talk about marriage. So I used to see that almost every weekend. Wow. And sometimes even during the weekday. Didn't think much of it, but I think it really got to my parents' head too. Like, oh, okay, so she's 17, or okay, we have to get her married. So this is really when that all kind of came in. And when this started happening, my mom told me, hey, so when you were born, you were promised to someone. And I was like, who? I don't even know who this person is. And they told me, yeah, you were promised to this person.
I got to just highlight that. But for everybody to come back, this is a teaching moment. Listen to what you're going to hear here, because for a lot of people, it's surreal. Keep going, Maria.
Yeah, they said you were promised to your cousin. not even just someone like your cousin. And I was like, what? And my mom told me when you were born, my aunt said, oh, when she grows up, she's going to marry my son. And my mom now, she was saying, look, they're so successful. They're very wealthy. Wealth is like one of those things that's the number one thing people look at there, right? Were very wealthy and he's a good guy and you should marry him. And I was like, no, I'm only 17 and I don't want to get married. Right. But we were now 6 months in and my parents had decided that they don't want to stay in Pakistan anymore because everybody was sick. Nobody was liking it. And my mom and dad were looking at me and they're like, well, she's of age, so maybe we should just get her married. And so they decided that I was going to get married. And my dad did ask me, he had a conversation with me. He's like, instead of you coming back to Canada, why don't you get married? You'll live such a good lifestyle here. It's a good family, etc., etc. And I was just like, no, I don't want to do that. And my dad, I remember specifically told me, he's like, well, if you don't do it, I'm never going to speak to you again. And there's no room for you in this family anymore.
Oh my goodness. Just hold on a minute. I got to chime in here. Catch your breath.
Yes.
I know this is a story that you tell a lot, but and you seem to be able to separate the emotion from it. So congratulations on that. While you catch your breath, I just want to put something on the screen here. Looks
Sure.
like you've got a fan who's sharing some feedback with you. It says, for those on the audio, your story is very inspiring to all of us. And that's from Mahira Fatima. Who's that?
Thank you.
Do you know her?
No, maybe someone.
Yeah, well, I got it.
Hi, Mahira. Thank you.
So now I got to say that's the fun thing about live stream because it's indelibly marked on the show. But Maria, you are inspiring because your story is connecting to this person, and hopefully they'll be able to find you somehow. But just take that off the screen there. We'll put it back up later. I've got to say to you that my heart aches for you, and I know you're past this now with your family. That's probably the most hard thing for any child or young adult to hear. I do a lot of work in brain science. I just want to share this because it was my own learning that when we grow up we have human needs to feel accepted and loved and enough. And I went through my life because my dad had certain issues where I was searching and I was pushing myself in my career and achieving. And I said this in a TED talk I just did about I was a self-worth chaser, not a success chaser. I was doing things for the wrong reason. But at a young age, we have this brain that can't rationalize. It's called it's in the limbic system, and it wires everything in we hear and see as truth. And then later in life, if somebody says to you that, I'll never speak to you again, or they create this sense that you're no good, for a lot of people, that their life's done. Some people go into mental illness, they turn to addictions and drugs. I'm so proud of you. I know you're going to tell us more about how you got out of this, but there's far many people who don't get out of it. So there you are, and your dad's saying that if you don't get married, you won't be able to stay in this family. Incredible. So take us from there through to how you got out of it, and then when you started the journey of figuring out what are you going to do with that story.
Yeah. So obviously after that, like I ended up getting married. I had no choice. Like my dress was picked out for me. The whole wedding was planned. I literally just had to show up.
Without divulging a personality or a identity, can you just give us a sense on the profile? Was it a young person? Was it somebody like you related to, a professional, or like how did that fit? Even though it wasn't a fit, the person.
Yeah. I mean, I was 17 and he was like 5 years older than me. Yeah. He had just finished, I think, his MBA, and he was helping his dad with their business. So I didn't know much about him. I did get to talk to him a little bit, but it was always with other people there. So it was kind of weird because how much are you going to really talk to someone with other people there?
I've seen that in Bollywood movies only. It's interesting to talk to somebody who's lived it. Oh my goodness.
Yeah. And his family was very promising. And, I did tell them, like, I really want to finish my school. Like, I don't want to just drop out. And they're like, no, don't worry. You can finish your school. You don't have to worry about anything. We'll have our driver take you to school, bring you back. You can study. There's so much going on at home. We have cooks. We have this. You don't need to worry about anything. That's what kind of I was told. So I felt a little bit better. I'm like, okay, at least I can finish school, because even though I didn't realize how important education was going to be, I still had some idea of, no, I do want to be educated. So got married. I don't know. It was literally within a month. Everything was planned. And I just showed up It's like, here you go,
One of
you're
those
wearing
big
this.
traditional Indian
Yes,
weddings.
huge. Yes, it was a huge wedding. And I was just told, put this on, wear this, go to this salon to get ready. And I was taken everywhere, and I was literally just dressed up and like put there to get married. And obviously it was like just leading up to it, so much anxiety, and I was so sad because I felt like I had to let go of Canada and that
Yeah.
part of me. So got married, and at least my family was there at the time. So I was like, okay, you know what? It's going to be okay. It started off okay. There weren't any big issues or anything like that. But then I think the issues really started when my family decided, okay, she's married now, she's okay. And my parents decided that they were going to move back to Canada.
Yeah.
Now, my mom kind of talked to me about it, and I was like, well, okay. I mean, I could see how much my siblings were suffering. So I was like, you know what? Okay, it's fine if you guys have to go. So after a few months, my parents moved back. So they didn't even end up staying there a full year. I got married in, I think, January, and I think March, April, they moved back to Canada. So now here I was by myself in Pakistan.
Let me ask you this, because my mind's riffing on this, going in many directions. Because I'm an advocate for mental health, so you said you were sad and whatnot, but that's an example of separation anxiety, and this is your family, right? This is your core. All of a sudden, they're all gone, and you're by yourself with somebody you don't even know. Can you?
Yeah.
I can't even put myself in your shoes. I'm so sorry you went through that, but can you just, even in a few words, explain how you felt, what it felt like? Were you trapped? Were you powerless? Were you angry?
It felt very foreign. And I did feel powerless because my whole life was going in a direction that I had no control over. So it
Yeah.
was just do this, do that, and I had to do it. It was almost like I had to dress up when they wanted me to dress up. I had to go somewhere if they wanted me to go somewhere. And this is in Pakistan, you live with the family. You don't just live with that person, your husband or wife. So my mother-in-law obviously had so much control over what was going on. So I was just being controlled, do this, do that. And I think the one thing that I had was school. So I was going to school. And when I got my exams, it was all in Urdu. So I literally left everything blank. I can't read Urdu. I
Oh
can't.
gosh, and you were under the understanding what they said to you. Oh my goodness. They told you it's going to be in English. Don't worry about it.
Yeah, and I remember even when I got the exam, I asked like the proctor, I was like, excuse me, I was supposed to get my exam in English. And she just looked at me like, what are you talking about? And she's like, okay, let me check, and didn't check. And I sat there the whole 2-3 hours for every exam, didn't write anything, left it blank, obviously failed everything. So here I am failing again. And my in-laws were like, well, you're failing, so what's the point of sending you to school? And I told them, I think I need to go to an American or British standard school, so everything is in English. And they just said, no, that's too expensive. Like, we're not going to send you there, because the government school is much cheaper, easier to send your kids there. So education was done. I had to drop out. And at this point, I was just at home. I started cooking, cleaning. My mother-in-law's like, okay, well, this is what you need to do if you're at home. You have to learn how to cook. You have to clean. So my whole life was just getting up early in the morning, making breakfast, lunch, dinner for everybody. And when I mean everyone, there's at least 12 people in the house. So
Wow.
Cooking, cleaning. Here I went from, living such a different life in Canada to cooking. And my mother-in-law even let go of some of the maids because they're like, oh, well, she can do it. So I had to start cleaning and, that type of stuff. And I was so miserable. Like, I was just so miserable because I was like,
Yeah, I was going to say misery. I'm a home chef. It's one of the ways I express myself. I learned to escape home, and was learning about cooking when I was young. I was kind of have a dark sense of humor. I was thinking like, man, I got to get with you because you got some life skills. Cooking for 12 is not easy. But
yeah,
the thing I'm coming back to is you were raised in Canada. You were raised in a land. And so this is a teaching moment, everybody. You're hearing that. I believe, Maria, that we when we're raised in an environment that's not like Pakistan, and then we're transplanted in there, you have no belief systems. Your brain can't even fathom it. So even trying to live that life, it's futile. So where did you do from there?
So from there, the one thing that I really started doing was I discovered a bookstore, and I've always been a reader. So I discovered a bookstore that had books in English, and that wasn't very easy to find too. So I discovered a bookstore. I just started reading. So that was all that I really did after the cooking, the cleaning. I would just sit there and read. That was my life. And I emphasize on these books because I discovered an author, Sidney Sheldon, and all of his stories were about women that were going through some sort of struggle and how they overcame it. So it was like their whole life story of just struggle, struggle, struggle. and then how they overcame and they became these big businesswomen. They became actresses. They became just so many, started to do such amazing things with their lives. And I didn't realize that till now. When I look back, I'm like, oh my God, like the heroines really kind of stuck with me. And I don't know if that somehow had an impact on how the rest of my life went, but I do think it did, because as my life was going on, my relationship with my now ex-husband, it was okay. It wasn't like he wasn't the most horrible person until I started to see text messages on his phone. He was talking to other women. There were lots of like, I love yous, I miss you from other women. And I even saved those numbers, called them, and I'm like, who are you? And they were like, well, who are you? And they didn't know he was married and stuff. But it happened on multiple occasions where I saw him texting other women, talking to other women. And obviously I had no trust in that relationship then, right? So I think that really stopped us from developing like a loving husband-wife type of relationship, because the trust was just.
Did he eventually find out you knew about that?
Yes, I confronted him many times, and he's like, no, that's no one. What are you talking about? Like, make me, a lot of gaslighting, I think, made me feel like I was crazy. I'm like, I talk to these people. I'm not making this up. And they're like, no, she's lying. She's doing this. She's doing that. But I think seeing the messages and talking to them, like, if you add it all together, it made sense. So in that aspect, our relationship wasn't that great. And my whole life was just the cooking, the cleaning, reading books. And now this was going on. And I think that really upset me, because I thought at least I have a happy relationship, but didn't even have that. So it came to a point where, he would promise me, okay, I wouldn't. And then we would just fight about that all the time. You're talking to this woman, you're talking to that woman. And he, like, I think a lot of Pakistani men had anger issues too. So he was violent in the sense that, sometimes push me against the wall. Or this one time I remember he just like punched the wall, and I was so scared. I was like, oh my God, that's going to be me next time. Or what's stopping him from hitting me? And this is a time before iPhone. So I couldn't really talk to my parents. Anytime that I did, it was in the family room where everybody else was there on a phone. Yeah. So here I am by myself.
No privacy.
No privacy whatsoever. So I couldn't even tell them anything that was going on. So then there was this one day where I think for the 7th or 8th time, I still saw messages from women on his phone. And I was just so depressed. And I talk about this in one of the article that I wrote, but I came to a point where I think that was my lowest point. I went into the bathroom and I was just like ready to end it all. I was like, okay, this is it, and what I ended up doing was, now I laugh because, I mean, I don't know, it's such a weird feeling, but I tried to like slip my wrist with some glass, and oh my gosh, it's giving me like the chills just talking about it. But
why don't we let you pause, and I'm just going to talk at you for a bit. First of all, I love your story. I love you, and I'm honored that you're sharing it. I know it's painful. It's funny because you're a strong woman, but I see that emotion. Even if we're watching the video, I can see that. I'm really sorry that you've gone through that. It's horrible, and no man should treat any woman that way, or vice versa. We'll get back to the suicidal. They call it ideation when you actually plan or think about that. To get to that point, you're almost at the point of hopelessness because you feel there's no way out. But this really is why I love your story, and I want to support you, is because I've learned just from people I've met in Canada, especially the youth growing up in the South Asian community. And I grew up with a father he drank, but he hit my mom, he hurt my mom. And I saw my uncles hitting their wives and treating them that way. And I grew up wondering, do all men act this way, or is it a thread back to, India? Why is it like that? So we won't get into that, because there's definitely a cultural issue there, but this exists in every culture. And I wanted just to say this to you while you catch your breath and pause a bit, that there's a woman I met here when I wanted to write my first book, Kamal Dillon, and if you search her, you'll find her. And she wrote a book called Black and Blue Sari. She met me at Starbucks because I found her on LinkedIn. I just wanted to find an author I could talk about how you write a book when I wanted to share my story. And when I sat down with her, she looked a little odd, and she said, see these little slits below my eyes here? She said, he tried to gouge my eyes out. And so she basically in her book accounted years of, he poured gasoline on her and tried to light her on fire, and he broke her draw 7 times.
Oh
If you
my
go close to her, she's a beautiful woman, but she looks like she's the elephant woman when you get close.
God.
And so you need to meet her. She turned that story, as a Canadian she is now, and she's living pain every day, but she turned it into a story of hope. And sadly, and why I'm so proud of you, it was too late. She spoke up too late. You're young and speaking up early and inspiring people. But going back to what I was saying, that this anger management thing, I think it is an epidemic certainly I know in the South Asian community. The young people have such anger, and I don't think we can solve it on this show, but I'm starting to have feelings that maybe it's because I know a few people like that maybe it's because of the pressure. No excuse. That's to be arranged marriages, to the head of the family, to do the family business,
Mhm.
and maybe, just maybe, there's some anger there being misdirected at the wrong people. I mean,
Yeah.
everybody's not born angry, but
Mhm.
there's absolutely no excuse. There's a line. Uh, so there you are in the washroom, and did you actually, if you don't mind me asking if it's too difficult, did you actually cut your wrists and proceed to try to do that, or just thought about it?
No, I did. I tried to do it. And I remember like I had cut myself once and there was like a
Yeah.
little bit of blood and obviously it hurt. And I was like, oh my God, but the pain was hurting even more. So
Yeah.
I tried to keep going. And then obviously I think when I had taken the glass, I had to like take there was like a shelf of glass and there was stuff on it. So when I took it, I had to smash it in order to get a
Yeah.
sharper, edge. So my ex-husband heard, and then I think my ex-father-in-law heard too, and the door was locked, so they were trying to like smash the door open as I was doing this. And it was just such like when I think about it, I'm like, oh my God, if someone had seen me, it was such a horrific scene because here I am in a white nightgown cutting myself and like there's blood dripping down.
It's like a horror show.
Yeah, yeah, and just crying. And I remember my eyes were like so swollen because I had a mirror right in front of me. And then they broke down the door and stopped me. So they brought me out, called a doctor. The doctor, no one, and it's weird because nobody talked about it. And that's
Mm.
the weird thing. Like the doctor
Yeah.
came, put bandages on me. Luckily I didn't hit an artery or anything, thank God, now when I think of
Thank
it.
God.
But doctor came, I added lots of bandages and just told everyone to keep an eye on me. And that was it. And
Yeah.
nobody talked about it. Nobody asked me, what were you doing? Or what was that? Or why are you doing this? None of that. It was just the next day, everyone's acting normal. And obviously I was just quiet, depressed, sad. And my mother-in-law called my mom and she's like, she's not feeling well. That's what she said
Yeah.
to her. And my parents talked to me. And then when like I picked up the phone, I just started like crying. And because I think by now it had been like a year and a half since I've seen them or whatnot. So my parents were like, you know what? Why don't you come see us? It's been a while. Why don't you come see us? So I was like, yeah. And right away, they talked to my parents. They talked to my parents, talked to my in-laws, and then they were like, okay, go for a few months because they could tell, okay, things were not good. So the day that I was leaving for the airport, and I think this is such a significant moment because
Can you tell us the year or the month, the year?
Yeah, so I think by now I was probably like 18 and a half, almost close to 19. I don't remember exactly when I came, but I remember it was probably 18 and a half to 19. So I had been there almost 2 years. And the day that I was leaving, and this is what really kind of changed everything for me. The day that I was leaving, I put my suitcases, everything in the car, and I saw my ex-husband on the patio. So I was walking up to him slowly. I was like, oh, I'm just gonna like scare him or something. And he was on the phone. And as I was going in closer, he was making plans with another woman. And I could tell because I could hear her voice. And he was like, yeah, no, I just have to drop off a family member to the airport. I'll come over right after. And I just stood there and listened to the whole conversation. And then when he turned around and saw me, his face went white. And I could see him with his hand turning the phone off, right? And then I was like, oh, who are you talking to? He's like, oh, no one, just a friend. But I could literally hear the other woman. So that was the last time I talked to him and got on the flight. And I think when I got on the flight, I'm like, I'm never coming back. That's when I was like, I am not going back. I don't care what happens, not going back. When I got to Canada, I saw my siblings. They were all so much older now. I hadn't seen them for 2 years, right? My sister got so much taller and Oh, it was such a good feeling being back in
What
Canada.
it's funny they say the brain, how it goes on in a roller coaster. I'm going to do something here just to honor that. Let's celebrate that moment, the moment that Maria got on the plane,
Oh, I love that.
and congratulations. And I got to tell you, that is, you have courage, man. You have courage, and that's classic hero's journey. You had enough. You heard the pain, and you finally. And they, it's to some people it sounds like denial. It's like, how many times are you going to have to realize the guy doesn't love you and you need to get out? But everybody, it's not easy when you're caught in this web, because it involves family and belief systems and fear. So you're back home and you're celebrating, your siblings are older and whatnot. Let's
Yeah.
get into the last piece of story, which fascinates me. So I want to throw this out just as a thought for you to talk about, that everybody, many people in the world have stories, not all parallel to yours, Maria. And there's some that take the story and do something with it to
Mhm.
empower others, and some that don't. You've done something quite remarkable, I think, to use that and develop and help others change the world. So tell us about some of those things, because it's kind of cool.
Yeah, so I think when I came back, I was just like, wow, I felt like I was given a second chance at life. And I told my parents, I'm going to high school. Like, I need to finish grade 12 because I'm 19. I still hadn't graduated from high school. And my parents, not very supportive, but I did it anyway, went to school. And this is when I was like, okay, it's now or never. Like, there's no more failing. There's no more excuses. Like, I need to pass and I need to do well. So I got a tutor. I started doing night school for the classes I had failed in grade 11, caught up, and I did so well in grade 12. All my teachers loved me. I was now finally getting A's, and came
All
the
right.
time to apply for universities. And I didn't tell my family, didn't tell my parents. And by the way, I stopped talking to my ex-husband, ignored his calls. I was like, I'm going to apply for university. Didn't tell anybody. Applied for university, got into all schools that I applied for. And I really had to fight to even go to university because my parents were like, no, you need to go back now. And by this time, I told my parents a little bit about what was going on, and their solution was, let's call him here and then we
Mm.
can keep an eye on him. So they were doing the whole process. I was just living my life at this point. I was like, nope, I need to go to university, started university. This time I was like, I'm going to do everything that I was missing out on. I joined the dance team. I tried out
Way
for
to go.
yeah, I was like, I love dancing. I joined the dance.
What kind of dance? What kind of dance?
So it was South Asian dance.
All right.
So they did a lot of like Airbnb in there, a little bit of like reggae. There was a little bit of belly dancing, a whole bunch of stuff. So a lot of different things added on. And there were like competitions that happened every year, which was so much fun. Made lots of friends. I joined the student union. I ran for elections 2 times, won once. And school wise, I was doing great. I was doing much, much better, passing
Yeah.
my classes and just learning. And it was literally like I felt like I was coming back to life at this point. And I always felt like I was catching up on those 2 years,
I want to
you know,
just say
just
this to you. I want to say this to you, just with to again honor the story, the transformation that I've heard, and they say, and I believe it, that when you are in a space where you want to be, then you can be incredibly successful. If you have this burning desire in your gut, and so here you are, you're back, you're in the life you desired, you wanted to be there, you're doing incredibly better in school, all these things are happening. I want to just do a shout out as sort of to also honor your parents here, that despite, like I was just going to say, now when they're trying to send you back, and I don't mean disrespect, I've told my parents the same thing about their beliefs sometimes. It's not about you, mom and dad, it's about your beliefs. But that's such a broken belief system, to say bring him here, well, to keep an eye on him. I'm thinking about my 24-year-old, and it's like, excuse me, if there was a guy beating her, even threatening her, or doing what this other person was doing, I wouldn't want him anywhere near my daughter. So it's like, come on, we're in a different world now. What I want to say too is that one of the things I'm learning from you, which I'd like to know if you've discovered this, is whether you believe in faith or not. I believe in my faith. I had to find it again. And by the way, I was kind of the black and blue kid growing up. Most of the abuse in my home was towards me from my father, physical and mental, when he was drunk. So I understand what it's like to feel hurt. The thing I was trying to say about the faith is that if you believe, if you believe in yourself, and
Mhm.
you believe in hope, you just sometimes say why. They say don't ask God or your God why those things happen with your parents' decision, but look for the meaning of it. And I really think that you were put in a situation for another calling, that you had to fight and survive when you were a kid. This is the hero's journey I'm seeing. And you had this resilience, play volleyball when they told you couldn't, do this. Now, because now you have these incredible superpowers, I think, to do what you're doing to help the Mahiras. Uh, so
Yeah.
you are doing a lot of things with that. Tell us more, and then you mentioned an article as well.
Yeah. So, I mean, after that point, I was the first person to travel the world in my family, the first woman to graduate university, the first
Where'd you
woman to
go? Where'd you
get a
go?
job. I went to
Where'd you travel?
University of Toronto.
And where'd you travel to?
So I've been to Germany, I've been to London,
Wow.
Italy, Dubai, travel the world. I honestly, like after that, I feel like I lived my life,
Yeah,
all the things
good
I
for
knew
you.
I wanted to do. Meanwhile, I still got my education, I still got a job, I was still very responsible and everything. And I just the way that this the article came about with Toronto Life magazine is that I finally decided I didn't talk about this for so long because I ended up getting a divorce, and this is something you don't really talk about in the
Mhm.
Pakistani community. So I didn't talk about it for a long time, and it was still something that was like eating me up. I was like, I should be talking about it. So eventually, I shared just a snippet of what happened on LinkedIn, and it really just blew up. I had like at least 100 people message me and say, "Oh my God."
That's how I found you. Yeah.
Too. Yeah. And that's when I was shocked. I'm like, I had no idea so many people had gone through this. And during this time, an editor from Toronto Life magazine saw the snippet and they reached out to me and they said, hey, we'd love to tell your story in more detail. Would you be open to that? And I went to my parents and I was like, they want to tell my story. Like, what do you guys think? This is the first time my parents were like, you know what? It's your story. Go and tell it. You have our full support. So just where they've come to as well throughout this whole thing, it's insane. They've evolved so much too, because again, you don't talk about these things in the Pakistani
Of course.
community.
Yeah. I want to also say something about that too. So, there's good research that suggests it's about 80%. I think Oprah Winfrey, you know who she is, might say, I've heard her say 90, but when I grew up, I thought there was something wrong with me and everybody else is perfect
Yeah.
because of what you just told us, which is brilliant. People don't talk about their traumas. What I realize and what the research shows, about 80% or more of people in the world have some form of unresolved or traumatic experience. It doesn't have to be this, it can be losing a job or losing a loved one. And we're
Yeah.
taught not to talk about, but here's the bold statement I'm going to make to all those people in the communities watching. It's like, wake up. What do you think? You're living in a bubble. I grew
Hmm.
up, and you can't expect that people outside your bubble are not going to realize that, sometimes, not all the time, you maybe mistreat wives, you maybe control your kids, you maybe don't let them make the choices. People know. There's a lot of good that our community does, but outside of that, we got to start talking about it, and more people are talking about it. And thanks to you, more people are making inroads there. I want to put this little comment up on the screen again. We got a little bit more from Mahira. I'm reading it out loud. She says, I'm from India. My story is similar to you. I'm making it with my daughter, and I'm really glad you came out of this thing. I aspire to be like you one day. Lots of love from India. Isn't that amazing? Uh,
Yes, it
I
is.
can see the emotion in you. And I gotta tell you this. I'm so proud of you, but this is the thing. If it doesn't matter how many times tell your story, if you publish a magazine, who reads it? In fact, Brene Brown, who's one of my choice readings, she says, when you tell your story, not everybody deserves to hear it. Tell it to the right tribe. And if
Mhm.
one person on this interview today saw your story and you change your life, you hit a home run, and you did. I mean, this is going to go viral too, and more people are going to hear about it. Uh,
Yeah, and I think
so,
that's why I want to talk about it more because
yeah, you have to.
we don't. And that's what I teach people now too, right? I teach people public speaking, especially introverts,
Sure.
because that's something I struggled with, speaking up and finding the right words and the courage to speak up, right? So that's why
Fantastic.
I do what I do now. And the only reason I've shared this story and put myself in such a vulnerable position is because I know who this is going to help other people. It's going to give people hope, if anything, someone that's
You
going
you
through
have. You have. And now I'm going to move to wrapping us up because I know you have another commitment to get to. There's other things that you're doing with your work. You're a coach, you're doing public speaking to teach people,
it.
introverts. You're doing so much. And I believe there's more in you to come. So tell us where people can get a hold of you or any of your work, your articles.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm very active on LinkedIn. And if you've gone through something like this, please connect with me, message me. If you're someone that is afraid of public speaking, I'd love to help you. And the article, if you want to know more about the story, it's on Toronto Life magazine. So you should be able to find it there. But yeah, LinkedIn, I'm there 24/7.
That's amazing. And you can send me the link. We'll put it in the show notes. I wanted to be quick here because I know you got to run, but I'm going to full screen myself. There
Yes.
is a background on my screen there. That's my flat screen. That's actually called a challenge coin. Challenge coins were created in World War II. When I
Mhm.
started the show years ago, I wanted to have an award that would go to heroes who came on the show, who checked their egos and told us the truth, and we learned from it. And you're a quiet warrior, and not everybody gets on my show. So this coin is handcrafted and painted. The front is the show image. The back is incredible. It's the hero's journey narrative narrated, designed. You're going to get this, and today I'm inducting you into the quiet warrior tribe. You'll join people in 17 countries now. Less than 40 a year go out, so you're joining the tribe, and you'll be connected for life. Welcome.
My God. Thank you so much, Tom. I really appreciate you having me and giving me the opportunity to talk to you about all of this.
Yeah.
And just thank you so much. I really, really appreciate it.
All right. As I let you go, I write 4 words down, leadership words that I write as you talk. One is courage, one is love, one is resilience, and one is like, I just got to say, wow, for somebody your age, what you went through and what you're doing with it. Fantastic. So, everybody, find this show and give it a listen when it comes out. Subscribe to the podcast and also the social media YouTube channel, and live the life you deserve and desire, like you've just heard from Maria. Wow. And come back again and hear this story when we air it soon. Thanks, Maria.
Of course, Tom. And I really want to thank you as well for having people like me tell their stories. I think the more people hear it, the better. So thank you so much for what you're doing as well.
All right.
I don't think you even know how great this is for everyone.
Well, thank you. And I know you got to run now, so we'll see you again. You come back anytime.
Awesome. Take care, Tom.
All right. Bye
Bye.
bye.